Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi John Tarrant speaks to the discovery in Zen that all of existence belongs to the same family, and how we somehow come to recognize both the distinctness and the interconnection of everything that is as we uncover awakening. Conjuring the great Loch Ness monster as an unexpected ally in the domain of practice, Tarrant guides listeners in turning toward the vastness and incomprehensible as vital avenues along the great road to freedom.
Mayumi Oda just called me, and how are you feeling? She said, life is great. I can't get out of bed, but life is great. So fair enough, whatever our circumstances, I'm wondering about, Tess is not on, and in New York is like, God knows if she even has power, so Courtney's here, she has power. It's nice. So
it's just cloudy right now. It's not doing much. I guess it rained last night, but not enough to wake me up or anything. So maybe in for more later. We'll see.
Excellent. You don't have waves running up and down your street anyway. Good job. Okay, so, we always start just by feeling what it's like, It's kind of an amazing thing to be alive. And one of the great old teachers said about, the tradition and refuge, and the fact that, the tradition kind of teaches itself. It teaches people to teach it. And then, so, here we are doing it right now. And it gets passed on like that. And this old teacher said, well, you can't explain it. You can just accept it with gratitude. So that's what I do about coming to teach in the temple, It can't be explained, but it can be accepted with gratitude. So, and the title of today's talk is The Family of Things, and there's a verse by a guy called Wu Men, No Gate was his name, Wu Men, and he said, with realization, with realization, all things are one family. He said, without realization, things are separate and disconnected, and we can feel that sort of, there's a certain part of us knows our connections to things, connections to each other and to the weather, and there's a kind of warm empathy at the bottom of things, and so it's something I think we noticed. There's a kind of when people found out about mirror neurons, they were fascinated and started like trying to work out what they did. But I think all they do is notice that the family of things, it's like, and so when we see somebody, chimpanzees, somebody's lifting a banana to their mouth, the other person's the neurons to lift your hand and go off, and I think that might be greed, but it's also empathy. And so we have that with each other. We look at someone's face and there's a kind of warmth, but also, we look at a tree, we look at a fox, we look at a bird, and we've still got the fledgling dramas going on here that among the birds where they just don't know. They're clueless birds just wandering around. It's like, what is that? Like yesterday, and it was an oriole, and orioles are these beautiful, magical creatures that flit in and out of awareness. But there's a couple of they drink honey directly, so they're always they tip the hummingbird feeders up so that they can get stuff into the bowl and drink it all if they can. But there was not a trace of yellow on it. And it's a new Oriole bird that doesn't even know what it's doing, but it found the tree that its parents drink nectar directly from. So we're all just learning like that, and we all I have a feeling for that Oriole, And so a lot of the meditation has that quality, just the empathy with things, but also not opposing them and not opposing their destiny, or not really not opposing our destiny either. And so the beginning of awakening is something like, well, what's it like? What's it like to be me when I'm not having opinions about it before I'm feeling it? Not having opinions about it before I'm before anything. And so one of the nice stories, one of the nice Taoist stories about this is, Zhuangzi fell asleep, and he dreamed he was a butterfly flitting gaily over the fields, drinking from flowers, completely unaware of Zhuangzi. And then he woke up, and he wondered, was I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or am I now a butterfly dreaming I'm a man? He was unmistakably Zhuangzi when he woke up, but he was unmistakably a butterfly when he was dreaming. So that's a kind of koan-like awareness. What is it like to be a butterfly? What is it like to be a me? So, and there's a whole slew of koans that we use in this regard. That a traditional thing. It's really remarkable, but koans just about the issue of empathy, and are we aware that we're in the family of things with everybody? And it's kind of marvelous, really. And they're called, very helpfully, they're called the miscellaneous koans, which means that there's no actually coherent theme, but they're all about like the transformations that you are part of eternity, and also you're you, with your particular. If you hold up your hand and look at your hand, it's different from the fox's paw or the bird's wing, but you can tell that they all have Buddha nature. When there's only the bell and there's nothing else in the world, we realize, we have empathy for the bell, yet we are the bell. So in the little story, you're actually in the UK, you're in Scotland, and a friend says, let's go sailing, and the weather seems pretty good, and so you go out sailing, and it's wonderful, and you're on one of the great lochs, and the weather's very mild, and then it gets a little foggy, but it's all right, and the wind is not very strong, and you're just sort of bowling along, and suddenly the Loch Ness monster appears. And first of all, you just see this shadow on the water, and like that's something far away and big. And you see the shadow, and then you see a coil come up, and then you see another coil, and then you realize it's noticed you, and this dinosaur-like head comes up and looks at you, and it starts coming towards you, and so that's a koan. What will you do when the Loch Ness monster comes towards you? What will you do with the Loch Ness? How will you deal with the Loch Ness monster? And that's one of our miscellaneous koans. How will you deal with the Loch Ness monster? So you have to feel your way into the Loch Ness monster. So let's just sit with that for a bit. It's another version of what is it like to be me. How will you deal with the Loch Ness monster? Well, you and the Loch Ness monster can work it out. Letting the silence fill you. Not trying to really actually work out the question, the koan, just sinking, just keeping company with it as you sink down. Loch Ness Monster, silence. Ah, this, the sacred field of meditation. Whoever you are, whatever you are, you can come here, and it will be all right. You're always going to be welcome here. It is your place, the temple. It's as if you're in a dream. The music is playing, the Loch Ness Monster is here. What will you do? The old teacher who taught Zen in a prison camp and poetry in Japan during the war said, "You save all beings by including them." What about the Loch Ness Monster? Enjoy your Loch Ness Monster. I'm just letting the silence carry you the way the water carries the boat and hold you up. You're one family with the water, one family with the Loch Ness Monster, one family with the boat and the clouds and the breeze. One family with your poor friend who's with you in the boat. Well, we can see the one family quality. There's a kind of peace. When you come into the temple, you don't try and leave anything of yourself behind. And then, because of that, really, you're at peace. Because if you're not leaving anything behind, you're not fighting with it, but you're also not hanging on to it. And gradually, the meditation teaches the meditation. What do you do with the Loch Ness Monster? What do you do with your monster? And we're naturally at peace together in this vast temple we have made. What is it like to be you with the Loch Ness Monster, either inside or outside you? So there's nothing you need to be afraid of. Or if you're afraid, then the light and the silence is inside that, and so you don't need to be afraid of that either. So you're there. We might say the Loch Ness Monster is there. If anyone can look after you, the Loch Ness Monster can. So the hidden allies we have in our lives, the secret companions, and perhaps we tell nobody. But there's enormous strength in the things inside us and within us. And just feel your life here as we sit. And the only thing is, you don't have to fix anything or correct anything. You notice when your mind's doing that, well, you're not letting the monster look after you, are you? So you're not letting life and the vastness and the incomprehensibility and the peace and the terror and the illumination of it, which all comes together, and the beauty of it. Here. So we're just here. This. And everything that has ever been or will ever be can appear here in your temple, your part of the temple. It can appear here in your part of the temple. Here means here. Your part of the temple means your heart, mind. Wu man, no gate. Wu means, it's what the teacher said about the dog having Buddha nature. Wu means no in Chinese, mu in Japanese. And so with realization, all things are one family. Without realization, everything is separate and disconnected. We kind of know what that's like, when we feel like a very small self and we've got to hang on to who we are, and we kind of flow out into the universe. And I always think of myself as being a disciple of Descartes at such times. There's a me here who's trying to tell me I think, therefore I am, and that's why I'm here. And then meanwhile, this vast sky is flowing overhead, and the birds are flying through it and falling out of it and buzzing past, whipping past my nose. And so then because he was a Zen person, and all things are one family, with realization, all things one family. Without realization, everything's separate and disconnected. Most of us, we can kind of get that, at least aspirationally. Then, because he's a Zen person, he said the opposite. He said, with realization, everything is separate and disconnected. Without realization, all things are one family. So it's rather fun. With realization, each thing stands. There's a line from one of the old poems. Each thing stands in its own place. You are the tree older than the forest it stands in. You fill the universe. It's kind of fun. And that thing about undoing the structures the mind makes is part of it. You can feel that's part of it. As soon as I start to believe something, I get skeptical about, which is kind of, the nice thing is about Zen you don't have to believe stuff, because what is the first principle of the holy teaching? The emperor asked Bodhidharma. Vast emptiness, nothing holy, said Bodhi. No first principle, said Bodhidharma. And so we can relax about trying. The small self is always trying to form something and become something and be something, and hold off the world, and it's a tremendous amount of effort. And instead, there's just what we are really is a kind of flowing. And Loch Ness monster appears, and we're that. The bird appears, and we're that. A lot of people understand this. Whitman, is one of the shamanic poets of the Americas. He said, and he has a good. This is right at the end of the 1850. It was a 19th century poet thing, I guess. Wordsworth did this too. People kept writing their poems and usually making them worse, but in little bits making them better as well. Whitman, this is right at the end of the 1855 version of Song of Myself. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. And you can tell, partly that's just a stance and, go to hell kind of thing, but it's also kind of true, and there's something relieving. Mao Tzu said, somebody said, what is Buddha? Mao Tzu said, this very heart-mind is Buddha. Look inside. And then somebody else decided they'd test this and asked him again, what is Buddha? And he said, not mine, not Buddha. Do I contradict myself? But you can tell that there's this flowing happening in all cases. I concentrate towards them that are nigh. I wait on the door slab, those who are near. Who has done their day's work and will soonest be through with his supper? Who wishes to walk with me? The family of things, who wishes to walk with me? Will you speak before I'm gone? Will you prove already too late? The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp all over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wilds. It coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air, I shake my white locks. At the runaway sun I fuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know what I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you nevertheless, and filter and fibre your blood. Falling to fetch me at first, keep in courage, missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you. So you could tell he had that feeling that I am all things, but it's not my me that's all things. So there's this continuous movement into being, into feeling the vastness and how we're all of that. We are the dragon and the Loch Ness monster and the fox who comes in the night to get dates in my house, things like that. And we're the birds. And we're the people we love, and also the people we can't stand. It's kind of nice. I had, and dreams tell us that too. Like, I had a real falling out with someone who I was close to a long time ago now. And I don't know. I didn't know whether she behaved badly to me or I behaved badly to her, but or both. But I had this great dream where I was in the zendo and by the altar, and she walked in, and actually I was right by the door, and she walked in, and she didn't say anything, just looked at me. So she walked towards the altar, and I walked up to the altar with her, and I turned to face her at the altar in this ceremonial place, in this ceremonial way, and she said, "I've come to take refuge." So she wanted to go through this whole Zen process, and I could tell that the dream is working out all the difficulties and sorrows in the world, that the dream works that out. And if you have a practice in a certain way, down underneath, things work out, like that things work themselves out. Like Whitman says, the grass, I'm underneath your feet, that works things out, And so the dreamy quality, we can't just push and pull life into the shapes we want it to be in. The dreamy quality does that for us. So I wanted to tell a couple of stories about that dreamy quality in life. One was last week, and Michelle was on, and last week none of the musicians was here, and Amaryllis is meticulous about these things, had informed me, but I'd sort of not read the email carefully, and I had some vague idea she was away, and I forgot. I had a lot of things going on. Anyway, I was just me. Anyway, I didn't track it very well, and so, and then I look, and then I'd already contacted Michael, who played today beautifully. Thank you, Michael. And he said, "Well, I'm on the beach playing with my grandson. Probably not me." And I said, "Well, we like that. That's good." And so, and then I knew Jordan was away, and then somehow I'd forgotten, and then I knew Michelle was coming. She came to my house last week. It's this week, and so anyway, so long shaggy dog story here. And I thought, oh, Michelle's got a great voice. I'll get her to sing, but I completely forgot to ask her, and because I was just thinking about other things. I'm thinking about nothing, actually, just feeling my life. And then, so I get to the four vows, and wow, Amaryllis really isn't here, and nobody is here. And then I thought, oh, I was going to ask Michelle. And so I asked Michelle, and I said, would you sing the four vows? And not only did she say yes without a blink, but she also had brought her briefcase with this very old-fashioned, interesting version of the four vows with her. It was right there. She pulled it out. There was no reason for her to bring her briefcase with her. So I thought, well, that's one of those rhyme things that the universe does for us. Like, you need the four vows in the old-fashioned version. Great, here it is. And so those kind of things, I think, happen a lot, and they're the little. We didn't cause them, but and I'm not sure the practice. They seem to happen. I think we become more transparent when we practice a lot, so we'll get things like that. And when we can't rely on that unseen help, it feels a bit more painful, and we can tell that I'm being a bit selfish. I'm withdrawing into myself, something like that, when I can't rely on my, it's like you can tell that when you're in a meditation hall, you can tell that there's a kind of freedom you start having. You become transparent yourself, and what you thought you wanted is fine without, because you're not just what you want, you're this flow of things. So that was another story another story that I liked, that seemed to be about the way things move mysteriously in the dark. There's a woman who still sits with us sometimes, but had come from a deep spiritual practice but with other kind of Hindu traditions and things like that, and was and she came to one of our events, and anyway, she spoke and she said, she stood, and she'd been really quiet, but like the third day, when it was time for people to speak, she spoke, and she said, well, I haven't spoken in a group before. And I said, well, yeah, I noticed you hadn't spoken. She said, no, I mean in any group, ever. I said, oh. And so that was great. So she really didn't like to speak in groups, and she had a very traumatic experience where it was a young child, and one of those like gothic things where her mother had a psychotic break, and she dealt with it by, not speaking and staying out of her mother's way. And gradually when in school, so she didn't speak in school, and she got through, and then she became actually that she did this spiritual practice, and she became the CEO of a small not-for-profit who would put up with her just having very small meetings. She could speak with about 4 or 5 people in the room. So there's something kind of incredibly charming about it. And she didn't apologize for it. She says, I just don't speak to groups. It's like there was no defensiveness or anything. Oh, well, fair enough. It's like the bird saying, I fly, and the dog saying, I run, but then she wanted to do refuge. And in our thing with refuge, you have to do, and so I got a name I talked with her about a name, and so I said, well, the thing is, you have to say your vows aloud in front of the whole community, because that's part of refuge. And also you have to write your own understanding. If I take refuge in the Buddha, or I vow not to kill, or whatever it is. And you've got to give your understanding of that. And not to be right, but to just let it into your heart. So that's the empathy thing again, the one family thing. And the family of things. And so she said, okay. And I had a bad feeling about this. So the afternoon, the ceremony was at night, and the last night of a long retreat. And I said to her at lunchtime, I said, well, have you got your vows? And she said, well, I'm not going to say them. And I said, but you have to. And she said, I could tell, like, she was going to win. I wasn't going to win the trial. and I could tell that somehow it wasn't. It was in the Tao for something different to happen. And so she said, I know, I'll get some other people to say them for me. And I thought, well, that's kind of touching. And so she chose 2 other people to say, and I said, do you want me? And she said, no, I know who I'll ask. And so, and so it was really fun. So then 2 things happened. One is she chose 2 people who stuttered as children and had incredible difficulty with public speaking, and she didn't know that. Somehow she managed to pick. There are only 2 people in the group of 50 people, and she managed to choose them. And one of this wonderful guy from Southern California who's a tech software person, and he anyway. And he said he had to put himself right in the back of the group, because he just kept thinking, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get in my car, and I'm going to drive home as fast as I'm going to drive all the way to Southern California as fast as I can. And he was sitting there shaking, knowing he'd promised to do these vows. So it was a tremendous and the woman who died, she also started and still stutters sometimes. See, I start stuttering myself when I feel my way into people. And so she chose that. And then the other thing was, I said, well, you've written them out, like, so you'll give your interpretation of, I take refuge in the way, I take refuge in enlightenment. And she said, no, their vows are as good as my vows. So she just had them make it up on the spot. And because it's supposed to be this soulful thing where you really go in and say, well, what is not stealing for me and things like that. She said, well, everybody's one family. And so she, and it was it was tremendously touching. And these two people said it for her and they stumbled through their lines and didn't. And so I thought somehow that's in this area of things, it's that life is always providing us little hints about how we're close together, and that part of us that's inarticulate, and part of us that thinks ceremonies are annoying and could somebody else do it for me, and part of us that thinks they're really precious and I'd love to have them and be in them. And so all of that was in this event. And so I want to read one more thing. This is a peculiar and intense poem of W.B. Yeats, William Butler Yeats, who's an Irish poet who was very involved in spiritual practice and things like that, and a century ago. And his whole thing about life after life, birth after birth, And this is just a tiny fragment from one of his last poems called Under Ben Bulben. Under Ben Bulben, and this is just the second little stanza. Many times man lives and dies between his two eternities, that of race and that of soul. An ancient island knew it all. His way into being Irish. That an ancient island knew it all. Whether man dies in his bed or the rifle knocks him dead, a brief parting from those dear is the worst man has to fear. Though gravediggers' toil is long, sharp their spades, their muscles strong, they but thrust their buried men back into the human mind again. I decided I'd just read that without sorting out exactly what it means. So that sense that, we carry the images. I was writing a piece about death, which I'll probably talk about next week, maybe. Not death particularly, but the experience of writing for Lions were asked me to write a piece about death, and they asked for 500 words, and I said, I don't think I can do 500 words, but I can probably do 1,500 for you. And they said, great, we'll have 1,500. And it was interesting, but I noticed my father was appearing in my mind a lot, so like his unburied quality, or his helpful, benign, warm quality. Well, it's not so hard to write about death. Like, it's not a problem for me, he was saying, my long dead father. So rather, he was this benign, sweet presence, and muscular. Not sweet isn't quite right, but he's got a Lord of the Underworld quality, if you like the Lord of the Underworld sort of thing. So muscular sort of warmth to him that there's nothing to be afraid of. Okay, so let me stop there. And does anybody, Alison, do you want to say anything, or not?
Sure. When you were talking about the Loch Ness monster, and you gave us the image of Nessie sinking down into the darkness, and when I've taken up this koan before, I hadn't ever really quite felt that quality of the meditation itself, of being in the dark and sinking down into the dark and being held in the darkness like that, moving in the dark. And yesterday I found myself, I was in the ER, actually. I was in the ER. I'd hit my head. I actually ran into a temple bell that we have in a Japanese temple bell. And I hit it so hard on the top of my head that I got knocked out. And so I find myself in the ER. I'm in one of those, which is a very underworldy kind of place. It's like the world that the Loch Ness monster lives in, I think, where there's a lot of dark currents running through everything. And I was, they'd taken me, I was lying in one of those beds, they take you into the back room, but it was one of those, in the ER, one of those rooms where more than one people can come into it. So they've got this curtain in between me, and there's no one next to me. And all of a sudden, there's all this activity, and they bring this unconscious person in next to me, right in the curtain, behind the curtain. So it's very much like being underwater. I can't see anything, but I can hear all the drama unfolding next to me. And it's this person who had come in with, I'm not sure what his original problem was, but when he was in the ER, he was in a wheelchair, and he was getting up to go be brought back, and he slipped and fell out of his wheelchair and knocked his head and went unconscious. So here he was, just like me. Now he had the exact same problem, but he was still unconscious. And then everyone in the room was sinking and moving in the dark, taking care of him in various ways, and suddenly he's awake, and someone's rushing in, wanting to make sure that the hospital's not at fault and not going to be sued, and someone else is tending to him waking up. There's a doctor there, and then I hear someone say, they're reading his chart, and they say, oh, they say on his chart that he has some sort of quirk where if you ask him a question, when he says yes, he means no. And when he says no, he means yes. So it's this completely, it was like Zhao Zhou's dog, does he have Buddha nature or not? Yes, he says. Next time he says no, and you just can't quite tell what's going on. And throughout the whole thing, I just started to feel this was this tremendous, mysterious joy of being in the middle of life. Like, I just didn't want to be anywhere else but swimming in the dark in this room with this whole drama unfolding and everything standing in its own place, each thing in its own place. That's the report from the tiger.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's a great underworldy places where people have revelations and are also excruciatingly bored. There's that terror and boredom kind of go together. While I was waiting outside the ER, one of my friends who, old Dharma friends, who's a tech person and knows philosophy and stuff, he's suddenly and I'm being really bored, of course, and he texts me, not knowing anything about what's going on with me. There's a term called the Tathagata Garbha, which is the womb of the Buddhas, the womb that everything comes from, you and me, and it's really the valley spirit, I suppose, but it's a very technical Sanskrit term, and the Chinese just waved at things and improvised, like Zhuangzi wondering whether he's a butterfly or not was how they'd say it. But the Sanskrit was an Indian tradition, and very piles and piles of philosophy, and intelligent and interesting, but slightly different approach. And anyway, but the Tathagata Garbha, Tathagata is the suchness, and it's the womb or the mother of suchness, the cavern, the vessel of suchness, of everything. The womb of everything is. And so he sends me this text saying, boredom is the Tathagata Garbha. Really abstruse bumper sticker. So I had to look up, what is Tathagata Garbha again? It's a very important concept if you're doing Tibetan Buddhism, and that's a long time, and I sort of wasn't too clued in. I thought, well, okay, anywhere you go, but it does, like boredom is interesting, and it does take, it's a kind of holding back from life, and then through the holding back from life, you can enter life, because it's unpleasant and it stirs your interaction. That's one of the great old theories of enlightenment, that enlightenment comes through the agency of something difficult or unpleasant. Through your own delusions lead you into awakening. So it's kind of nice to know. Got to start another meditation. There's more possibilities later, but okay. when you trust the meditation, you're trusting yourself, really. And you may, I don't know, you're trusting your deeper self that is part of the family of things. The voice of the bird or the voice of the traffic, it's for you. If you get swallowed by a remnant dinosaur of some aquatic dinosaur and you go down, down through the silence, or you are an aquatic dinosaur, and down, down to the silence and the peace of the temple is always here. The light and the simplicity, and it's for you. What to do with the monsters and the silence that is inside everything and the light. Just, you notice that if you, meditation kind of, I don't know, the silence comes up around you or deepens you. It doesn't really matter what you think you're doing in your meditation, which is, I found very consoling. It's like, very good that the universe has its own opinion. Meditate, the koan has its own opinions, and I don't need to get involved with them. So just let the koan carry you, and then the silence wells up around us, and I don't know, we have thoughts. It doesn't really matter, and we're not so committed to our thoughts. I have a friend who has insomnia, and he was complaining about his insomnia to me, and I said, well, what happens? Because, you wake up and he said, well, I try to get back to sleep. And I said, well, what do you actually do? And he said, well, I listen to podcasts. and I said, well, and he said, I just don't get back to sleep. And I thought it was funny because it was a bit like saying I meditate while listening to podcasts. I suppose it's conceivably possible, but it's the wrong part of the mind. It's the separate and disconnected bit, and in fact, every time you sleep, you go into the place where there is not even any waking or sleeping. All things are one family. So we see, and meditation, we become more, I suppose transparent is one way to put it. And I think to stop fighting with ourselves, stop criticizing ourselves, stop having opinions about how we're doing in anything in life. Our appearance, our age, our gender, or whether or not people accept our gender, or all that stuff, It's before anything really. All things are one family, and that silence. So without, you'll notice the mind will start assessing, or, I don't know, some minds like a problem, other minds, count things. It doesn't really what your mind thinks it's supposed to be doing. Just, you don't have to worry about it. The Loch Ness monster will take care of all of that. There's a beautiful thing about that translucence and transparence. It happens when the silence gradually overtakes us, and we can feel the mind is free, and we're free. I mean, just look around the room, look at somebody else, and it's all meditation, it's all silence. There's nothing that's not. We're not separate from things. We're not standing outside our lives. The beauty of having the Loch Ness monster on your side. Years ago, I was, a long time ago, I had to go to the ER late at night in North Carolina. And it was the old Duke ER, and like, it's just full of that. It's like, it's got the sergeant major type screaming out names if you're next and things like this. It was really a theater piece. And so I went in and they asked me my pain scale, and I started thinking, well, don't feel like I'm actively being eaten by a bear. And I don't, like, things like that. So I gave them some like 5 or something. I was really in a lot of pain, but it was a sort of Australian sort of pain scale. So naturally, they triaged me to the very bottom. I never saw anybody all night, and I had to wait there all night. And so anyway, I took Alison to it. Yeah, and she did the same thing as me at first. And she's like, well, I don't want to make a fuss. And so she's a Zen person, of course, it's fine. And we gave up because we weren't just worried. It was the same thing was going to happen. We were going to be there all day and not get the CT scan. So, and then we decided, no, so we went back again. And I said, let me talk. And so Loch Ness monster do it. What's her pain? And she said, well, it's about, and I said, 9. And I said, she's confused. Don't listen to her. It was great. And it was really fun. And so we had a lot of fun with that. And it was the same person who triaged us way to the bottom, like a couple of days before. She's the first person in. So it was like, see, the Loch Ness monster. You're neither sick nor not sick. You neither. But we wanted we just knew that any other doctor we saw, they'd send us back to the ER to get it, because they triage you that way. So, are you bleeding in your head, in your brain, things like that. So it was rather fun. How the Loch Ness monster got her to the head of the line. So yeah. So just thinking, how all the forces can conspire together with us, really. I don't know. I want to ask somebody I don't usually ask to speak. Dolly, do you have anything to say?
Yes, it's that experience today. You were talking about the Loch Ness monster, and what came to me was being a Taliban warrior and then being an airplane at the Kabul airport. And that kind of a sense of what will you do? And all of a sudden there was nothing